yeah, I think I'll just turn it over to Susan so we can get rolling. Thanks.
We just wanted to say what a privilege and honor it is as MIT Performing, which is a collaboration with the Center for Art, Science, and Technology at MIT and its Music and Theater Department, to be working with Lion's Jaw and all of these fantastic artists. We're obviously very much looking forward to future years where we can all do it in person, but it's such a fabulous honor to still be able to participate in this way. And after that, I'll just hand it right over to one of my very favorite professors and artists, Tommy DeFrantz.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, well, Jess, Eroca, you're there.
Hi.
Start with, yeah, let's start with, I've lit my candle to ground my being alongside you as we work through some ideas together. I'm broadcasting from North Carolina, and we're on unceded lands of the Shakori, the Eno, and the Catawba people. And I begin with gratitude to have some time with you, to go through some stuff and see where we need to be, where we are, and hopefully maybe where we want to be. So let's start in easy with the acknowledgements you need to do, the queer you need to bring into our group tonight, and also the essential, how shall you prefer to be addressed by others this evening? So where are you? How are you? What are you? Where are you? How are you? What are you? Let's start there.
I love that whisper. That felt really tender. Thank you. Am I heard okay? Perfect. I'm coming in and immediately I'm feeling, I'm in my home and I feel a little nervous, but I'm reminded that I'm in my home and that we are just having a conversation and people are also here to, because they want to take part in that conversation. And so I'm reminding myself to breathe and breathe deeper and remember that. I'm in Brooklyn and I've been here the whole time, you know, years. Where am I? I feel a little, what do I need? What am I bringing in? I'm bringing in gratitude for this conversation. I'm really grateful to be here with you all, especially after our first conversation the other day. And I'm remembering that it is just taking it one day at a time right now, and through and with as much love and gratitude for our hearts as possible for getting us here. And I'm Jess, pretty, I should have said that first and foremost. And you can refer to me as Jess, use she, her pronouns. And that's that. Eroca, I'll give it over to you.
Hello, I'm Eroca Nichols. I'm also at home because this is where we are. My current home is in Toronto, Canada, on unceded Six Nations land. Also, I'm gonna figure out how to put a link because there's big uprisings going on, the 1492 land back lane stuff that's happening on Six Nations right now. And I just feel like because in Canada, it's gonna be Thanksgiving weekend, it's important to like support the ways that like folks are doing radical land back work on Six Nations and also on Wet'suwet'en, and they're doing some solidarity across Canada. So I'm gonna figure out how to do that because the internet is not my comfortable space. And I will send that on to folks if they want to be doing that kind of support, or have the ability to send support our bodies. Yeah, Toronto. I was so nervous to have the conversation before we had our like pre-convo the other day, and then I was like, oh, these people are magical. So I'm actually got really excited. And then as soon as I saw the Zoom, then I had a small like, oh. And so I talked to my sister and I said that I was feeling fancy because MIT and nervous because MIT. And she told me to wear velvet. So Melanie Nichols, I'm wearing velvet. She says you can't feel nervous and wear velvet for very long. You can't feel nervous for very long while you're wearing velvet. And I'm wearing, just to call some queer loves who are not on the planet anymore, just a little love to Glam Drew Henderson, who is my partner, and this is Grief Month. So I'm wearing extremely fancy shoes. in honor of them right now. So, oh, and how to address me? They, me. Great.
They, you. Yes, please. It's funny too. The addressing part, I prefer Tommy as a pronoun, and I like it sort of in every iteration, even if it kind of changes how language gets operated. I'm often thinking about how there's some artists who kind of choose pronouns that help us kind of reset ourselves and reorient ourselves towards a something else. And it's amazing because that's what we're going to try to talk through tonight and over these 3 days as part of Lion's Jaw, the virtual iteration. And this idea of queer futures seems to be super important, especially in these moments of grief, which are distended moments that just seem to go on and on and on, which is part of how Rona is positioning us among each other and away from each other, but we're also trying to figure out how to be towards each other. So I really wanted to see how orientation could be a kind of modality. We could think together through making and being near each other. What does near look like across Zoom? And also these 3 kind of gathering notions we have for tonight. I put them in the chat, but I'd suggested them to us: displacements, attachments, proximity. I was thinking about them in relationship to queer phenomenology, maybe queer orientation is a way we want to sort of move or imagine together, but definitely in terms of this queer resistance. And I'm thrilled that you wanted to bring a kind of queer ancestor into our grouping tonight to see where they need us to go as well. But let's start with displacements. Grief maybe displaces in a way. I'm wondering about that. I'm thinking about what it portends to be here and not here, which is maybe that moment, Eroca, you were mentioning, where everything's okay, I'm at home, and then Zoom, suddenly there's a bunch of people in front of me, but I'm here and not here. Where am I? So that, again, this idea of displacement. Let's start there. Where shall we go?
I feel like we were talking a bit about if I'm locating myself or my body in grief, or when talk about it in terms of love. So if I'm talking about it in terms of love, which seems like an easier place to start, maybe. If I love someone, then I have an embodied feeling of that love going to that body and coming back and, bouncing off of me, right? And so, and so when that person no longer has a body or they've died, then I feel like this is a bit, we've been talking about the abyss, and right, so what is the abyss? And the abyss is when it just goes and goes and goes and goes and doesn't bounce back. And I feel like it's a little bit of an epic way of talking about a Zoom conversation, but I feel like one of the ways that kind of grief, which is grief for loss of folks that have died, there's also this like grief for being in proximity with each other and being able to feel the physical affect of what's going on with us in a room. And then this thing of like, how do we then make a conversation that makes space for the displacement of all of us not being in a room together, but also then like, how do we locate the distance between our bodies and then feel that bounce back? And so I think maybe I'm talking about proximity rather than displacement, but something like that. I don't know.
I think if I may jump in, that's what the whole point is, for me to jump in. I'm going to do that. I'm thinking about like what it means to hold grief and to hold displacement. I was talking to a friend, Leslie, who's in here. Hey, girl, hey. About like the need for like missing like body work. I used to manage an acupuncture clinic, and so like a lot of like just like the touch of the body, which like I can get into like what you're talking about, Eroca, missing kind of the physical being around people and energies and those kind of like live connections, but and also like what it means to hold all of the loss of that in the body, and how like my body, you know, feels differently. Like I'm sore in different places. You know, I'm sore more often, or I know like 3 different people who like threw their backs out last week. Like these different ways in which we're asking the body to carry a lot more now than what it's used to, and what it means to then like process the loss of our physical relationships to people, to connection, and grief, grief is already held in the body, and so not to hold so much of it for so long, and what that feels like. So I've been thinking about, like you said, displacement, Tony. I think about intimacy. I think about like the want, the desire for that. So then it also brings up desire, intimacy, and what it means to like, this is the first time that I was like, oh, like displaced, and thinking about like, I like take like maybe like a disidentification approach, like a mimic approach of like, what does it mean to like displace inside of like the place, right? So then like being home, like I'm home, but I'm also in public, and it's like no longer my home, and it's no longer just my living room. Like I have to be very aware of like my cat crawling across me, and this kind of like different performance of what home is, which is there for me. Like home is like it means something. Like I cut it off from the rest of the world. I like to work at home, or you know, whatever. I'm going into a lot of tangents, and I'm not speaking slow as I promised. My apologies to the ASL interpreters, but I'm going to work on it. Yeah, those are my thoughts, that's period.
No, that's a fine place to keep threading us together. This idea of I'm curious about home as a site of sort of renewal. And, you know, remember when Starbucks was kind of pushing this 3 places in their capitalist agenda of, you know, your home and your office, and then this 3rd place where you're going to do other things and have another kind of orientation literally towards your life. But now we're displaced literally into these other ways of thinking about what any one space can be. And then maybe it does sort of beg the question of how we literally orient our home spaces, as you were saying, like the performativity of home, but, you know, what else can home do, especially if we're trying to imagine queer homes? You know, what are the terms of a queer home if it then also has to accommodate a kind of queer public or a non-queer public? Like, how do you do that?
I mean, it's making me think about the sort of, I mean, in some ways, in a lot of folks that I'm close with, like the sort of dismantling of queer home that's happened because of COVID. Like lots of poly folks being like, what? I'm with one boo? And so this whole like, then are you then monogamous because you're in an only, you know? And so that it's that like, what are the ethics of home? And then what are the performance of those ethics in a context where you know, the safety level and whether you have folks who have immune compromised situations. And so like, what are these ways that we're actually displacing the identity of our ethics inside of how we think about what we're doing at home as queer kin? And this has been a thing where I feel like, you know, sluts the world around have been like, Eroca, am I still a slut? And I'm just like, yes, boo, you are. We're still like, it's just, there is like, are we allowed to claim or hold or still define ourselves in this way as queer sluts? And this is something that I feel like there's a displacement of identity that's happening inside of queer home making during COVID. And yeah, this thing about like, what is our orientation towards our identity as queer, poly, or whatever folks, when the access to what feels at home in terms of your sexual practices or what feels at home in terms of your partnership practices is not really available. That's what I was thinking about when we're getting in this mode here.
I mean, you were just like saying the practice, like it's a loss of practice, right? So then it's like, without the practice, am I still staying? it
Mhm.
becomes like, oh, like how is my identity? Like our identities have shifted, right? Because we are no longer in that practice. So then, if I'm poly, like, am I not poly right now? Like, if I'm not actively doing the thing, and like, what are ways then that we can hold on to those or recreate those, or I mean, not recreate, because that I feel like alludes to like a kind of like going back to like finding it, and we can't go back. But yeah, like, what does it mean then to, I guess, locate again like these practices to keep those parts of us alive? Because I think that what is really beautiful about queer identity is that it allows for so much, right? Like we were talking the other night about, like, we want to leave space for like travel and to allude to different things, and to imagine like otherwise constantly, and have the freedom to do that without being pinned down to a thing. And so, yeah, I think that's what I'm really been grappling with people that I know. Like, what is it? Who am I without these practices? And am I without the practices, or like, you know, I don't know. If I hold the practice, it's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it. Like, if I'm practicing at home by myself, but no one's around to witness it, am I still practicing? You know, am I still?
If I'm only a slut with myself, am I still a slut or whatever?
You know what I'm saying?
Right?
You know, like,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of tilts towards this question of attachment, though, too. You know, so what is it to be attached to a practice, you know, of slutting or slut shaming, which is usually the practice people practice on me. But that's a part of this conversation. And, you know, like, so then, you know, if I can't exercise the identity that needs to be slut shamed kind of constantly, what am I attached to about that then? You know, where do we want to put a question of attachments around practice and, you know, queer kin and queer home?
And a bit like, how do we, what, like, I think that there's also this, for me, I feel like in like dance folks, I feel like there's a difficulty in naming that we actually have methods. And I think that this I feel like is a place where I'm always just like, when I, especially in teaching contexts where folks don't consider the way that you do things over time and like practices as being methods. And so, like, what are the strategies as, you know, queer folks, or like in my case, like a queer, you know, dance weirdo that's all over the planet regularly teaching in these like little whoop, whoop, whoop kind of ways. Like, what are the ways that, like, what are my strategies and methods for being in touch with people who I love and family with all over? And how are those practices shifting because of, well, yeah, another moat, like this other abyss of like, when will we see each other IRL again? And so it's a bit like the practice, like this kind of hubris of like, oh, I'll see those folks again. And then the reality, and that includes my blood family, it's like, you know, what is the reality of the kind of communication, the kind of upkeep practice, the kind of family kin, like togetherness practices that we're doing that feel different and more, like, honestly, more high drama, because of the not knowing project that's happening. Yeah. Like, I used to talk in a way like, I feel like when I think about like kind of two relations, like whatever, like my relation with my mom, like my mom and I used to be real cash when we would be like, oh yeah, we'll see each other soon. But now it's just like, oh no, we're both having a hard time. So it's like we're hoarding the cookies of the difficulties, no? And then so if we're holding on to, I can't call my mom right now because, you know, there's just been a shitstorm of stuff for a whole month or something like this, right? And then with other folks, like my boo who lives in Amsterdam, it's like a shift has happened where it's like, now we are deciding, we are talking every other week. We've got a date. So like, kind of like what feels casual in one way feels very uncasual in another, depending on what the relation is. Like, what is the formalization that has to happen so you know that I love you and I know that you love me? Yeah, something like this. I don't know.
I mean,
Jess,
there's also some, sorry, Donna.
you're good. Go for it.
There's also something about like having to be intentional about that now, right, Eroca? Like where it's the kind of like last minute or spur spontaneous choice is gone, which is what a lot of us thrive on. The being like, oh, I can go to Amsterdam this weekend, like real quick, and then pop over here and then pop, or I can like go and like hit the park and hit the this and hit the that and like I can go all up and down like all the boroughs in like one day. And it's like, no, there has to be something more about intention and also space between those things, right? And like what it means to have to like go somewhere and then quarantine for 2 weeks and then like sit there and then go somewhere else. Like it's the formalization that that's the word that you were using. But yeah, I think that it's like an intention and planning that like maybe like is not interesting normally. Oh my God, my cat is freaking out. That's Katrina Davenport, Extravaganza Mateo. Say hello.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Dreamboat kitten.
I'm like, speaking of high drama, like this one. But I'm also like the need for drama, like the beautiful, like the beauty of like the performance in like queer culture, like queer kinship, like all of my people, like the being able to like do this, like step into the light, and there's the light is like not around / like I don't know, it's harder to locate these days, which then is like something with like joy and pleasure in there too that I'm still working out in my mind.
Also like the pleasure and I feel like, you know, when we're talking, I think about like femme adornment practices and the practices of like, how do I feel like, all right, I'm ready. And like, but it is like, what am I ready for? Like, am I ready for this Zoom meeting? I mean, I feel ready. I'm wearing a real great shoe, but it's actually for me, like I'm noticing that in terms of like the femme adornment practices that I need in order to be like, boom, business time. Which for me is like literally leaving the house. So like to be in that mode, it's like, I actually feel like that's been something that's been a constant, that practice of femme adornment. That's like, yeah, lipstick before I leave the house, even if I'm going, you know, even if I'm literally going nowhere, right? If I'm taking a little circle around the block, like, that's like, for me, it has been like this thing we're talking about, what is it to ground? Sometimes it's to light a candle, sometimes it's to call your peeps, and then sometimes it's to put on lipstick and be like, okay, my adornment practices are for me and my relationship with literally the planet. And so if there happen to be some people involved in that, yes, but I think that that's something that I realized, and almost in a way, like it's like, it's feeling like heartening to be like, oh yeah, that practice absolutely hasn't fallen away for me. And that's felt like, oh, okay, like this kind of things of like allowing that is, I have a very secure attachment to femme adornment practices as a way of like grounding and being able to be in whatever world is outside my door, you know? And so that feels like a thing where I can, almost like relax back into it, like a cozy blanket, the cozy blanket of gender performance, you know? Yeah. Or something.
That was great. There was something in there that was helping me think about, you know, in this election cycle, and now I live in the South, and I've been here for 10 years now. But honestly, before COVID, I was hardly ever here. Like, you know, like many of us, I literally was hardly ever here in Durham because I was always, you know, somewhere else doing something else. But now that I'm here and I notice these practices of self-care that are about the shell that I feel I need when I am sort of running into anyone, because the idea of the sort of anyone in the neighborhood down here in North Carolina gets really tricky. And, you know, there's just so much racism, obviously there's white supremacy, that goes without saying, but the literal racism of the gaze and the look and the kind of shell that has to be sort of prepared. So I'm thinking about that kind of preparation, which, you know, I had like attachments to a practice of how to get through the day and where to go when, and, you know, when to sort of be ready for something bad to happen. And now things are quite different, because anytime going out is is its own sort of adventure in a way. And then in this election cycle, it's all exacerbated quite a bit with the signage and, you know, which family is going to be down with like, I'm for the racists and whoever, you know, whatever those sort of rhetorics are. So I'm thinking about those practices of queer possibility too, that were daily for me, but now I have to figure out how I need them now and how to stay invested in them. I haven't figured that out at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, like that, like figuring out, so I'm thinking about like this, like being like the not duality, but the relationship between like being seen, like wanting to kind of perform, like going out, like wanting to put on the heel, wanting to put on the lip, wanting to like, you know, like tighten up, like whatever. But then also again, like on the very like same like edge of that spoon is that like racism of the gays that you're talking about. And that's like kind of this like dreamland, like nightmare thing that I talk about a lot in my research, where I'm like, they're very, very close. Like where it's like, I remember talking to a friend once and he was like, well, it sounds like you don't ever, like you never talk about comfort. And I was like, I don't know if comfort is a term for me. Like I've never thought out comfort or like thought about like seeking out comfort, because I think about comfort and I was like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, what's comfortable? And I'm like, oh, like a nice, like sexy like car with like leather seats, and I'm driving on the highway and like cruise control is on, and then I'm like, oh, and then I'm on the highway and I'm speeding and there's a cop, and am I gonna get, and it, like very quickly, it, you know, it's always right there. And so it's like even now, like heightened, like with the election cycle, like driving around in areas and I'm like, oh, is that like seeing American flags outside of homes now, and I'm like, that means something entirely different now. Like you, like it's like, what are you like? You're aligning yourself with America, which America right now is like it's so nuanced now. It means so many different things. And so then, yeah, how to keep alive, how to keep the flame under the queer possibility, how to keep the flame under that, like, yeah, how to keep the kind of like, it's like in house, like how to keep the jack going through all of it. But if you're like me the last few months, I'm just like, I'm just trying to walk left and then right, you know? So it's different work. It's different work. And it's doing the work of like you have to like build the club, like get the foundation, get the drywall, like get the lights, build the bar, get the drinks, and be the DJ, and you know, versus being able to just like walk out the house, like walk into something already made. And now we kind of have to build the whole world for ourselves to walk into, which is like not always not true, but especially right now, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also like I'm up in Canada right now, and there's a distance that's like a crazy distance from my family in the States, and obviously I'm not Black and I'm not dealing with that kind of racism, but there's this thing that makes me think about the ways that like queer flagging and how we identify safety, like, so what are the safeties that we end up like what are the ways that we signal to each other safety, like I'm a safe, you know, and it's all relative safety. So it's like the uncomfortability of what it's like to be concerned about the violence coming on bodies is the like the place which the invention of like femme adornment, or you know, the way people are hanky coding, or the way folks are doing other sorts of things to signal like relative safety inside a violent arena, which is outside. So this makes, and I think that there's something about like, especially early Pandy, where it was just like, are we in a horror movie? Like there's so much space, like the space between bodies, and like just the general, you know, like fear that people have of each other's bodies that has been like showing itself and then coming and going away. Like this moment, I felt like early Pandy, where white cis men were afraid of getting near other people. Like it was only for like a very split second in like this very big, like very early Pandy, where like people were like, oh no, we don't know what this is. And so there's like actually like getting out of the way for people, that I noticed that I was just like, this is something like, and getting less catcalling also. And so like this kind of ways of being noticed in the street and super, like it just being like, yeah, for a moment, I recognized that white cis men had fear on the street, which was something that I had never really experienced before. And that like, that was fucking really weird to be like moving and like having the space not be taken up in the grocery store or something like this, in this kind of like not just pushing through space in the way that I have experienced like white cis men doing. And I don't know if that's what other folks' experiences are, but that like for sure was something that I noticed this like very early pandy where people were afraid of each other in a different way.
Yeah, it did. No, that's yeah, it definitely was true in the places where I was as well, but it snapped back pretty quick. And it snapped back to, you know, the joggers taking over the sidewalk and you better get out of their way. It did snap back. And you know, you mentioned that. But it was this kind of moment that did sort of tilt towards oh shit, this could be a something else. And you know, one thing that as queers we're always really obsessed with, of course, because it's part of what queer might be about, is like, what else could there be? Couldn't there be something else? Where, you know, what else could, what's an otherwise way? Let me slow down, sorry. An otherwise way for us to be. And this question of proximity somehow, so these bodies, as you were saying, that would get out of the way briefly or be fearful in public in ways that was different. But then what's near now? So proximity and nearness seems urgent as makers, whether it's proximity to folks to be involved in an experiment or a project or a workshop or a making or experiencing it. I mean, we're all getting used to these screens and we're proximate to the screens in really different ways than we were 6 months ago, 8 months ago. But how is proximity unfolding for you and your making, being, queering now? What do you have to have near? What is it to be proximate for you? Eroca, you want to give it a whirl?
Ooh, yeah. What do I need to be near? The ground as much as possible. Trees, being with the land that I'm on and being outside as much as possible has been like, you know, it's always been a thing that's absolutely necessary. And then just general, like, this isn't necessarily proximate, like proximal, but I feel like inside of my practice, like my practice of now, which is this 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, I'm doing this femme meditation thing with Carly Boyce, who's a friend and long-term collaborator, and we're tattooing each other while we're talking about grief and death. And so it's actually this thing of like, in a way, it's a time marking thing. It's really like acknowledging that like, this is, you know, we were like in the beginning, we're like, okay, this is going to be a thing that lasts for like a hot minute. And then we'll do, you know, but now, you know, 12 episodes in, you know, her tattoo that I did on her finished, and we're just like, and then what happens? So I think that practice has helped make it be like, okay, this is like, what is it to mark actual body space time, and hold space for that to be something that we're not pretending isn't happening. That feels like part of it. And then that the grief so it feels like what am I proximal to? Proximal to the levels of grief and how that thing, it makes me think a bit about the way that Jess was talking about the holding of grief at like earlier about, and like, what is it to hold grief in these different ways over time? And that feels that feels like a constantly unfolding thing, where it's like if I try to hold, you know, if I try to hold it all, then I do feel like I'll throw my back out, knock on wood, right? And so what are the new ways, and what are the what are the old ways that I can connect to remembering that, like, how do I move it through? How do I move it through? How do I move it through? And yeah, I mean, waking up regularly to more death, and how to not both to both not leave space. It's like, how do we not normalize that and also be there for ourselves and the people we love? And I'm just like, I don't know, you know? Yeah, I don't know if I answered that question at all.
You did. It was, yeah, like processing and also trying to speak. I'm like, take time. But I'm thinking about the like needing, like the needing to constantly ask this question of like, what do I need? What do I need to be near? Because it does change. Because like as like more time goes on, as more deaths happen, as I mean, I've said this before that like every day now feels like post-election 2016. Every single day. And so there's kind of like the swallowing of like the big pill, and then being like, and I have to like answer fucking emails or teach a class or, you know, I have to show up. And I'm thinking that it's really interesting because for the first time in my life a little bit, I'm needing nature and space, and I'm needing to like be outside and go on hikes. And I grew up on the West Coast, like born in Durham, like grew up in the West Coast, and I'm like a beach girl, like through and through. But I need trees. I need like, and then what I'm realizing now is that I need the space. I need to be able to see and not see through fear. Like living in Brooklyn, like it's been like where I am, it's like people who have lived here for forever. Like, you know, they've been the ones who've been pushed back from Manhattan and Bed-Stuy, and like, you know, like, so now like we're, you know, so people have been living here for years, not going anywhere. But so there's always still a lot of people on the street, and I'm a person who like, I love people, I love connection, but I walk outside and all I see is like the fear of people not having their masks on, of people being close. So like the world you described of like white men moving out of the way, I'm like, what in the non-Brooklyn was that? Like it's still the same here, unfortunately. It hasn't shifted. Like people still don't move on the street, and especially like it becomes a kind of like, I dare you to, like, it feels very a la like Trump making fun of Biden wearing a mask. It's like, no, this is a real thing. And like we had 2 neighbors die within a month of each other upstairs, like directly upstairs from us, like in the building. And so like just like literally the like literal proximity to death, to disease, to like sickness, and like just the fear and the anxiety that takes over. And so like it's normally I see people and I'm like, yeah, like you don't move out of my way, like I'm gonna shove into you, I'm gonna move because this is my space too, like whatever. And now I'm like terrified of being around all of these bodies and being around all these people that I don't know. So it's like on one side I'm like, oh, the need of like being close to people that I know and hugging people and like hugging different people and, you know, feeling the different love, and also like wanting to be very far away from those that I don't, because of the like just the, yeah, I don't know. And it also has something to do like a kind of like disregard then for bodies. Like I think that the only people who really know how to stay far apart are performers, like people who are body workers who like have an awareness of their bodies, right? I'm like in the grocery store and I'm like, it's nobody's 6 feet. That are 6 inches at best. Like you were on top of me still as I'm in the stick. And there's markers on the floor. I'm like, so y'all can't, like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like true. And I don't think that it's malicious most of the time. I just think that people literally just have no idea how consequential their body is, how consequential their presence is, which is really beautiful. Like we all matter. Our presence means something. And also like the kind of like taking in, but yeah, I've needed like space. I've needed like more time to process things. Like I can't go straight through 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. anymore. I need time in between to kind of like digest and to process and to take more time for myself to recenter, because I feel a lot more sensitive now. I feel a lot more like, sensitive is the only word I can think of, but I'm like, I need time to like get back to like my anger. I can't walk away from her all day and then come back to her and be fine. I need to like know that she's like right there. Which is great in many ways because it just like sets more boundaries, right? That I'm not just like working and then I'm like, oh, it's 6 p.m. and I haven't eaten anything. I'm like, no, like you're making grand meals every time and that just feels really necessary. But it's like, I mean, I'm always talking about needing more time. And I think that that's what's really beautiful about queerness is that we can create those times. But I always want more time, more ways to imagine and to fall into different pockets and, you know, like daydream. And yeah, it feels in that healthy way. I'm remembering that I'm reading Berlin and I'm like, I'm not too far in the future, girl. I'm still here. I know that shit is fucked up.
Wait, which Berlant which one are you reading?
Cruel Optimism. Because if you need a book that is literally every sentence you read where it's just like, this is right now, that's the one. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's just, you know, it's keeping your toolbox like ready, you know, it's just like something to read where it's like, and she wrote it kind of closer to like the Wall Street crashing and that financial crisis and that political crisis. And so it's funny because she's referencing like these things that I'm like, no, that's same for literally right now. But it's been really, really great to read. And also it's very much like I'm looking at you right in the eyeballs and I'm not letting off. So it can be a lot, but yeah.
I'm thinking about this idea that we need a kind of moreness to keep imagining queerness and exploring out. But then there's also this concern around people we don't know, you know, that contradiction and that tension in there. So it's like, how do we keep imagining beyond or towards something else as we're busy with being among the people we're already busy with being among. So then how are you doing that? So reading is one way, obviously, but how else are you finding the possibility to keep exploring things you might not think to do or to be of or among in this time when it seems really challenging to be near people that we don't know? You know, this idea that if you don't know them, it's not clear how they're going to come at you or how we're going to go towards them, how we're going to orient towards each other. What do you do with that?
I mean, I'm thinking a bit about like this idea of like what has to replace what we cannot do.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, this feeling of like, okay, for example, like dancing. I do a lot of dancing that involves touching people, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is just literally the least COVID-friendly martial art that exists because everybody's grill is all up in each other's everything. It's like very smushy face, crotch and face, submission wrestling, basically. And so it's like when I activate, like, what are the things that, for example, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was doing for me? One of the things is keeping me from dissociating. Another thing is me negotiating how close I get to being not okay, right? And so that like long-term negotiate. So that's one thing. And then also just, 20 hours a week of moving minimum, and being in this push, real like tension, physical tension with other bodies, super strategic thinking, improvisation, muscle stuff, like all muscle stuff, and also negotiating being like a non-binary body in very straight spaces, which is another, like that's another thing, but that's the part that I don't totally miss as much. But they're like, okay, so let's say, for example, there's like, there's like my friend was saying, like, so there's 12 things that are happening in this complex form of dancing or of martial arts that is being done. And so what are the things that you can't replace it with one thing, you need to replace it with 12 things. And none of those are going to be the thing, but they're all going to be a place that, a way that you're spending your time and orienting yourself toward that is not what you have, or what I have been orienting myself toward. And so, just kicking the desk. Some of those things I feel like are like old ways of caretaking myself. So like when my partner died, I was like, yes, I do run 10K a day. So this, like, what are those things that are activating? But then also, yeah, like the other, like, what are the other things that are emerging? This sounds really cheesy, but I make a lot of roasted chicken. You know, so I feel like this thing of like food making and like feeding myself and my love is feeling like a queer futuring practice. And I know that this is also like the very old thing for many people. But if it were left up to me, it would be a carrot and hummus for like the rest of, you know, I'm just like, put the food in, do the things. And so because of this, not put the food in, do the things, there's a different like feeling of time and feeling of sustenance and being able to be, yeah, I mean, that's like one of the 12 things, but I do think that roast chicken as a queer futuring practice, I don't know if that exactly works, but it does feel in a way like a different concept of time than the kind of hustle that I feel inside of the general practice that I was in. Yeah.
And it's like nourishment, right? Like, and kind of like a more luxurious nourishment. And we're a pescatarian household, but like also taking the time to really elaborate in the meals. I'm like, I'm gonna take the time to make this Paul Hollywood 8-plat loaf. Like, I'm gonna take the time because that's what makes me feel good. And it also like literally feeds us, like nourishes our body, takes care of us, makes sure that we're still going. Like, I'm thinking about like Patricia Hill Collins and like Black feminist thought, like getting out of bed is a fucking radical act for a Black woman. Like feeding yourself, making sure that you can make it to tomorrow is a radical act in a time when like the downfall of us is just like preyed on all the time. And it's like, I'm gonna take this time to make this meal and find joy in it, or I'm gonna take the time to like, you know, like research this thing, or like go get that thing that like makes me feel good. Like saying yes to those like small, like what seem like small pleasures, like saying yes to like decadence, like in ways that don't feel like traditional, like in terms of like, I think people think of like treating yourself as like monetary, but it doesn't have to do that. I mean, food costs money, like, yes, you know that, but like also like in these tiny, like treating yourself with like time. Like it takes time to roast a chicken. It takes time to like get that grill out, take the insides out, like stuff it with all the goods, and you get to like, and there's something about it too that's repetitive. And so you're like, I know how to do it. It's something that we know in a time of so much unknown, like so much more unknown than normal. It's something you like, if you don't know shit else is gonna happen today, you know that you're gonna make a fucking chicken. Like, you know, and it's gonna turn out good because you made this chicken vigilant top, you know? And it's like treating yourself to that, to like and like they seem small, but like they just, for me right now, mean so much. Like I can't like open my journal to like write this essay that I think I need to write because I feel like I need to do something productive with this time, or like I don't feel like I can face myself in the studio as my own practice, but I can make like this beautiful salmon and like this chimichurri sauce and like carrot. Like I can do that, and so I will.
Like it also makes me, oh sorry, you still going?
You know, I was gonna do the thing where you just repeat everything you say at the end, but we've already heard it, so.
Okay, first of all, I can't wait till we meet and get to cook for each other. I also think like this thing of like feeling like feeling like, I speak in the I statements, like feeling like I know what use I am in the time when shit goes on, right? But like right now, I'm not strangling anybody because I got these talents, because I'm like, it's a coping mechanism for me to like be able to not feel, because I can't train. So right now, I'm not strangling anybody because I can't, because I'll break my fingers. But it's just this thing of like, this thing again, we come back around to like, what is the identity of what I imagine myself to do in the queer future revolution, like against white supremacy and all this stuff, is like, I imagine that I would be like, you know, my brother jokes that I'd be head of hand-to-hand combat security, right? So like, but actually, maybe I'm the chicken maker. So it's just like the chicken maker, you know, I mean, the cook, which no one in my life would ever believe, right? The chicken maker, Eroca Nichols, chicken maker. But it's like this thing of like that the shifting of our identities and the shifting of our practices are actually moving us to realize that like we are allowed to be more, and we are allowed to have that, like these, I feel on some level like soft skills, right? And so it's not like I don't think of, not that I don't think of jujitsu and self-defense as a soft art, because I do in many ways, but allowing myself to recognize that like I am able to, and I am of use in other ways that are both creative and functional and possibly with more ease. I'd like to imagine that anyway.
That's kind of amazing. It's maybe about an opening out towards, again, yeah, I know I keep hitting us on reorientation or orientation, and it might start being tedious, so we can move on if we need to. But this idea that, you know, to open in different directions or transformative directions that were unexpected, towards other kinds of skills and practices. What about soul coping mechanisms? I think that was a phrase you actually used the other day that I was really taken by, and have been sort of trying to marinate with that alongside your chicken. Clearly, like this idea of where, you know, but no, but yeah, like, you know, what are the mechanisms that again are about a reorientation? One thing I keep saying or thinking through is, if I'm doing things that I was doing 8 months ago, I want to reimagine my own ethical sort of address to existence or life, and the values that I, you know, try to move through or towards, because now says something else, tells me something else. So then, like, what are, you know, for you, mechanisms that are the places of soul coping? We talked about practical coping in a way, and that is soul work as well. But are there other orientations that you have that are helping you or surprising you along the way?
I'm trying to, I started therapy because everyone needs to be in therapy, but especially right now. And I have no problem sharing this because, again, everyone needs to be in therapy. And one of my main goals in this is to talk nicer to myself. And so, because I mean, like Virgo, like just work, and like crazy. And so when things fall through, and like they can be so small or they can be so large, I can be really, really like harsh on myself and talk. Yes, Ava, see the Virgo. But I can be really hard on myself in a way that it's not helpful, and it sends me in a shame spiral. And that was something I was like, that has to, like, I can't, like, everything else is doing the work of being down on me. Like, I can't be on that team as well. And so I've been working on being nicer to myself. And it sounds so small, but when I realized how often I was doing it and how often I had to, like, you know, pull my own edge back and be like, listen, we are not going to talk. And it's like a lot of my partner too. Like, she's like, so I just need you to talk nicer to yourself right now. Or like, she'll ask me, like, when was the last time you said something like good to yourself, or you complimented yourself? And I'm like, I didn't ask for this dragging right now, but I'll take it. But it's something like, that's something that is helping me, like the treatment of like me treating myself better is like slowly, but it feels like I'm just like tending to my little heart and my little soul. And I'm like, because I'm being nicer to myself. And that is something that like I totally never took the time to do, because it is work, because it's easier to just be like, why did you do that? Yeah. And then I'm just like, I'm useless for the day, it feels like. And that's awful. It's awful to feel that way. And especially now that so many things are, again, like not happening and not there. I've been working on, just like, what is it like to take some breaths, as I like have been trying to say since the beginning, take some breaths before I react to this thing, or just like inhale, exhale, and like keep moving through. Which has also been coupled with taking more time, intentional time for myself. And because of always being at home, and especially those first couple months, just like always watching the TV, like doing things that before I would define as a leisurely thing or a relaxing thing, because that is the everything. Like, oh, the time that I need for myself needs to look different. Like, actually, like, I do still need to take like an hour to like go for a walk by myself, or go for a bike ride, or, you know, put on my headphones and read or something. Because it looks a lot different now. Self-care looks a lot different now, because everything is kind of the same thing. Boundaries are different. So those have been a couple of things that I've been doing, and I'm still working on every single day, because the devil is a busy mistress. So yeah, she's booked and blessed, honey. She's booked and blessed.
I feel like my partner's gonna hear, if they hear you saying that, she's gonna be like, oh, I remember saying that. It's like, it is like this talking to yourself thing is so extremely hardcore. And I think that it makes me feel about, like, I was talking to another martial artist who has had a very serious injury, and she had that right at the beginning of COVID. And so we were talking about like the ways that like the negative self-talk thing's coming in for her. And then we talked about like sort of this idea of like fighting form body, training form body, and the Good Samaritan, which is like, okay, so like fighting form is like you're highly stressed, your adrenals are just like through the roof, you are fully in, you're training yourself to be in fight or flight mode, like you're ready to survive, right? You're ready to really, and you have to pump yourself up, and there's strategies for that, and that's a real thing. So if I think about it with dancers, I'm like, okay, so performance mode, when folks are on tour and they're underfed and underslept and under, and, you know, being deep in the commodification of our bodies and all of this. But then, and then there's like training body, which is like what I feel like that's like like if they're like relative comfort zone, where it's like I'm engaging in a fight, or I'm engaging in fight and training through like levels of boundaries that I'm pushing and not pushing, but I'm engaging with them in a way that I have agency, right? Where I feel like fighting form, performance form, there's not a lot of agency in that space. And so like this thing of like this training form is actually the space that I feel the most comfortable. Am I underfed and underslept? Probably. Am I running around a lot and trying to fit too much in? And am I overtraining? Yes. Right? Like there's no way of not saying that. So then this idea of like, what is the body of fighting form? What is the body of training form? And what is the body of Good Samaritan form? And the body of Good Samaritan form is a body that I have not gotten to know much in my life. And so this is new to try and get to know that body. And so the stuff that you're saying is super resonating about like how to talk nice, because it's also like, what is recognizing a form that I'm not used to holding and being in? You know, what is this being in a way like a bit alien inside my own form that is not perceivable to anyone else, partially because not seeing very many people, right? But like it isn't, because that's this thing too, right? Like what if we're talking like that, it's not about what is showing to others, it's really about this relationship that I'm rehaving or rehaving to exist within with myself. And how do I feel about this form, and how does this form feel, and what's jiggling and what's not jiggling, and what is being hungry and eating, what is being hungry for chicken and making chicken, rather than just like stuffing some food in your face on your way to train. And so I think that there's this actually, I mean, it's all coming back to chicken. I'm so embarrassed. Okay, cool. But it's like you're talking about this nourishing. So it's like, what is it to nourish the body that's emerging right now with a different relationship to time, a different relationship to what feels like the grating of grief. Yeah, like grating, not like cheese, but like cat scratch of it. And what is the body of that now? And so how does that, like kind of in this thing of like, what is the soul coping mechanism is actually to be like, what's here right now? Like, what can I feel right now? Like, what does it feel like to be in this particular flesh sack, in this particular moment, in this particular relationship to time, and the people who I'm able to be touching, and how much does that, how can I notice like how my desire becomes ravenous, rather than keeping it in check. And that I feel like also like sort of like soul coping mechanism of the ravenousness, not a word, of like sexual desire for myself or for my boo or for whatever, like, or for my boos that are not on the same continent. Like what is my relationship to that? And can I be with that? And that somehow feels both like extremely sad, and also, I don't know, like interesting to be in a new relationship to this like proximity desire and the unknown, and how that relates to like what it is to feel like being in this body that I feel like I'm like, oh, I know that body. I know this body. This is the body I've been in. And, but what is it to notice the changing? Yeah. And not be mad about it, or not be, right? And so like, you know, not what is it to, and I mean like, or be mad about it, right? Or kind of like not be in a judgmental place with the process of re-knowing myself in a different mode, which I haven't spent a lot of time in, at least not in recent memory, or maybe ever. Yeah.
Yeah, this question of time just keeps circling back, because there are these, I'm sure, well, I know I've experienced these days that they disappeared. Where did they go? I have no idea. And I'm a daily journalist. You know, I write in my journal every day. And, you know, the first 3 or 4 months of the Rona, I was reading old journals. And then that got, you know, at some point for me, that always gets counterproductive, because I get stuck in the self-deprecation place. Like, look what I was thinking then, what a ridiculous thing to think. So I'm thinking just about like, you know, talking down to myself across time, like, really, I can do that? And there I was doing that. You know, and then there were a couple of weeks where I was waking up screaming, you know, in the sleep, and these kinds of lower grade depressions, and then deeper depressions, and finding ways to, again, sort of reconfigure. For me, I'm always thinking about reorienting, to try to really understand differently how ground and time could operate in a way that I could kind of spread towards, or move through, or be of, maybe is the best way for me to think of it. So yeah, something about time and the days that do go away, if that's useful language, but then it's okay that happens. So taking care, or sort of being gentler, or rethinking time as being like, there can be days, or 2 or 3 or 4, I haven't gotten beyond 4, where there's not productivity in the old way of thinking about it before Rona. There's a kind of wandering through time, or with time, and allowing for this emergence of something else. So that's what I've been after in terms of trying to understand a coping. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know.
Mm.
I mean, I'm having like I have to make reminders for everything. Like, I'm like, okay, reminder to call this person, reminder to like do this thing, or I will truly like just lose it, like in ways that, I mean, there are like this week. So this week was the 13th year after since I've lost my father. And I'm like you lose someone, you know the date, like you don't really forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, I literally remembered it 2 days later. I was like, oh no, it's not the 5th, it's the 7th. And then my brother was texting me on the 6th, like, hey, just checking in because, you know, Yasha. And I'm like, where, in what world, like, am I in? And of course, I wanted to first, like, just be down and, like, you know, and it's also, like, time. It's been, like, 13 years is a long time. And so trying to be gentler with myself with the loss of time and the gaining of maybe other things and whatever else. I'm like, where am I then if I'm not right now? But and also to be like very just realistic of like the circumstances of like what's happening. And like, so then what are new ways of working then? If I'm not looking back at, you know, if you're like reading your journal and you're like, well, look at what I was thinking then, you're like, that's so crazy, or like, I was so busy, or you know, like looking through, or the thing happening now where like I'm getting at the point in my planner where like, you know, you'll pass some things that like this trip or this show or this whatever, and I'm like, not and how to kind of like yeah, like look at that and not blame the self for not, I don't know, just yeah, how to being more gracious. I was gonna say graceful, but gracious feels like the best word for that.
Or like also kind of like reorienting time towards dream time, because I feel like this thing about my like I mean relationship to sleep and the times I'm allowed to sleep, right? Like being able like in the beginning I was just like, whoa, I'm allowed to sleep. Like I can sleep. And so like what is this kind of reorientation that's happening there in terms of my dream space, and what is it to, I'm not a journaler, but I'm a hell of a dreamer, right? And so I feel like I've been able to be in the journal, like that's like, I actually think that that's like a relation that I can recognize these two as kind of being in a like sisters in terms of spaces. Yeah. And this feels like a reorienting towards allowing space to go into deep sleep. And so that has been a time shift for me. And also I've moved out of a basement of having a toddler live above me for a really long time. So like Clog Baby is no longer haunting my dreams. And this is like a thing where it's just like, what does it mean to, in a way, like prioritize? I know there's a lot of talk about prioritizing rest, but like, what is it to prioritize the activity inside of dream space and to allow that space to expand? And I don't know what that is doing, but it is definitely doing something. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's also like another.
This is a little bit of a turn, but it seems maybe, you know, helpful here. Like, so this space where we're meeting, you know, now is starting to concretize in a way, or is it? I need to make it a question. Is this space starting to be real for you, this sort of Zoom digital presence? And I wonder if it's related to how much time you spend in social media. I have a bunch of Facebook accounts, but I hardly ever look, and, you know, I'm not there much at all. So, you know, 15 years in, I'm still not really doing it. But I wonder if you're feeling that this digital self and the ways that we have to then curate or figure out how to be our you know, in all of our queerness as it is in these sort of platforms, like, is it starting to become something that you recognize as being of the you of you?
Jess, how do you feel? Because I'm like I'm like, oh, I don't know.
It's a very yes and no question. Like, I think I'm also someone who, like, I don't have a Facebook account. I don't I don't post a lot on Instagram, but when I do, it's golden. No, but I keep it very private. Like, I don't like to use it for like work, like, like I just really like to, like, I'm like, no, like when, shows or like people are like, oh, tagging my Instagram and something. I'm like, know that this is for my pleasure. And I'm not posting like dance reels. I'm posting like just me, whatever. So I think that there's the one part, and I was in a conversation earlier today about this digital realm and kind of like, do we, like, the resistance to shifting to it, right, in terms of performance, like teaching the classes online and making the shows digital and making which is necessary in some senses, right? But also, like, as a choice, I feel it doesn't still feel real. And I think that if I wasn't in the line of, to say work feels really weird, but like if my life wasn't aligned with like such a physical, why is language so hard right now in front of all these people? But if my work wasn't involved in such a physical like manner and like really connecting with people and reading energies and like, looking at the body and like if that wasn't so highly valued, then maybe now would feel real. But for me, it will never be enough. It will never be real. I will never feel like my full self on these digital platforms. And that's just the brass tacks about it. And I don't, and so then you were mentioning earlier about even through fear, how then do you find ways to connect? And I mean, it's a lot of bravery because I'm like, I have to get over myself and I have to get over my fear at some point in very like, not crazy terms, but because I do need to, that is something that I need. That is something that is like a part of like, not only my survival strategy, but like my thriving strategy, like reaching towards something beyond that.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like, I want to ask you, Jess, like, what feels like the future of, what are you futuring right now?
Tonight, like, we were talking about this the other day, like how hard it is to like look far forward. Because of so much uncertainty everywhere. I'm like, I'm futuring like the things that I know, myself, my happiness, like my love, like these cats that like I'm learning to love, but I don't like cats, but I have 2 kittens. So like here I am. Like, does anyone want them? No, I'm gonna keep them. But like so I'm futuring like myself in these ways and hopes for myself of like maybe I will like be able to start my writing practice again, like as it pertains to like my research and and I'm slowly but surely getting back into it, but I'm not able to future backtrack. It feels how do I want to word that? That's what I'm able to do now. And that is not how it always be because things change and we change. But I'm like, I had this question a lot in the beginning where I was like finishing up teaching a few classes online, and I was like, well, what if it doesn't end and then we're still having to do things on Zoom? Like, what if we're, year 5 or like, like whatever, but I'm like, will I just go 5 years without like showing a thing, which is fine by me. Like, I'd make work for myself and nobody else, but like, what does that look like? And I don't know, which is fine with me to not know right now. I think that what I'm trying to be more okay with is kind of finding or grasping and doing this, like realizing the losses, right? Like I was talking to the night about how I'm realizing now how much my teaching practice is so central to my other life practices. And so how to then, like, what is it specifically about my teaching practice? Like, how can I try and cultivate that in other ways that aren't just like me teaching, but like me doing those kind of sharing of things and energy in other ways, and finding other ways to do it. But like, I'm also not interested in just like following in with the norm of everyone doing everything. I mean, here I am. I'm like, get another Zoom channel, but like, you know what I mean? Like I don't feel the need to like fall. I don't feel the need to like jump in the water and like slow down the stream. Like that's never been of interest to me. Like if literally everyone was doing like their show on Zoom for the next 4 years, I would still be that one that's like, it's not for me. And that's okay.
I hear it. Yeah, like I'm late adopter and also like secretly 70. I just am like, what? I got on Instagram and the pandy because of femme meditation, because otherwise I was like, I don't know, Insta what? And it's not, I mean, it's like, I understand that it exists, but I kind of am like pretty slow. But I feel like until I understand, I don't know, like until I have a way to dream into being the thing that needs to exist in this space, then I don't feel like putting it there. You know, it's like, I don't feel like I can do the thing I was doing here. If I figure in some way what the thing that, if there is something that needs to come through me into this space, you know, I guess in a performance way or something like that, then I imagine making something for that. But I don't like, yeah, I'm like holding back on writing grants for this piece that is literally going to be in a bathhouse, and it's going to be me like combing people's hair and having, you know what I mean? This is like, honey, that's not Corona friendly. So it's also like this thing of like, what is it that's getting put on pause for a future that we thought we are going to be doing? I think in terms of like, what is the, yeah, like if all of the work, like you were saying, Jess, like is centering around touch and proximity and together, unless there's a together that I feel called to here, then I think that my togethers will be much smaller. And like folks who are, you know, folks who are in my pod, folks who are in my building, folks who are in my, yeah. So it's just like, in a way, it's like my world has been on that level.
But I think it's necessary though. Like I was today, like, and you're like talking about grants. Like today, I was like, someone was, what did she say? She said something about like these waiting to see if like the bigger organizations how they would come out of it, and I'm like, yeah, but like fuck them. Like they haven't shown up for us. Like we're all competing for emergency grants to like buy fucking groceries. Yeah. Like we're like writing grants to these institutions who haven't done shit for us this whole time. Like I'm like, how many people I know who are like me making $100 on unemployment a week trying to be what? Like, and where are these organizations to do that? Like where is like the grant for that? Like it feels so, I think that's also why it's hard for me. My voice is so loud and I'm talking so fast. I'm slowing down. But I'm like, it's so hard for me to imagine a future because so much of what was happening was so like it's not it. And we're taught to think that it's it because it's been the only way that things have been happening. But it's so ridiculous and it's so elitist and it's so capitalist and it's so unnecessary. And I think that like people, and I mean like we need to reimagine performance. We need to reimagine like the way that we're thinking about art and making and how it's shared and how it's not shared and the kind of like hierarchies that's been placed on because of like the 5 people who have money who can give it out. Mm-hmm. And we're all like writing these applications trying to make our like really weird shit sound like an MLA format essay in like English 101, people we don't know and who don't know us. And it's like, it's such a for me, it's such a crazy concept. And so to think about like a future where I'm like, I don't like, do I want to show my work at any, me never get to show again because of what I'm saying. But I'm just like, what do we mean when we say we want to have a show at like this place or that place? And I'm like why? Like why there? Like why is that the thing that we want to like aspire to? Because we don't know anything else. And so like what else is there? And that's kind of like the beauty of right now is that we get to imagine and we get to like really choose the future that we want. And we get to like, what do you want to do? How do you want to show your work? You want to show your work in a graveyard? Amazing. You want to show your work at the truck stop? Amazing. Like, let's make it happen. Like, it's outdoors. Like, you want to show your work in a bathhouse? Amazing. You can only have an audience of 1 at a time. Perfect. Sign me up. Like, and the show will have to be 3 months long instead of like a weekend. Like, these are the kind of like, those are the kind of futures that I want to imagine. But like, there's still too much power held in these organizations who show up too few and too little for all of the individuals involved.
Yes. Oh my God.
And there it is. I mean, yeah.
I love this.
I've been hearing, talk about hyperlocality, but also intentionality and intentional living. And, we've been curious about these, not curious, but we've been committed and exploring intentionality as a process and a possibility, especially in terms of queer living. And now we're compelled by the circumstance to move towards that, like to actually be oriented towards, just as you were saying, Jess, something else, like one person at a time, a grave, like whatever it needs to be, but letting it actually be what it needs to be, rather than sort of fitting in to some bankrupt systems that were set up that were, never about or interested in us in the first place. It's funny though, I mean, I got weirdly booked into a festival and the show is next week and I have to film it. So, I'll be filming the show over the next 3 days and sending the file so that it can be shown in the festival. And it's in Canada. maybe you'll see it, whatever. But it's not that it feels wrong. It just feels so incredibly different that I don't know what it is. So I am curious about it because of that.
Or like the bureaucracy has become the main event to which we all talking after listening. Bureaucracy and competitivity and all of the systems are the event rather than the interaction of the humans that are doing the work and the folks who are in receptivity with that. And so like what if we're orienting towards the receptivity, anyway, everything you said, Jess, everything. Oh my God. I'm just like, thank you. Yeah.
Well, we're in a place where we should share some where are yous now. We should try that again. Like where are you? We were futuring just now, but how about a nowiness?
Nowiness.
A nowiness. After our 90 minutes.
I keep thinking about, I keep thinking about how Eroca asked me the other day, like, what is your present? And I was like, what is my present? Because there's something about the present that feels so uneventful, right? I'm like, oh, like my now is I'm sitting in this chair in my living room with my feet inside of the stool that my computer is on, and I'm looking at my snake plant, which is thriving, and I'm hearing silence. And finally, because the man in the hallway who was cutting hair outside of my door is finished, I'm feeling like really my heart is beating and there's movement in my chest, and my mind is running, and it's grateful for that action because I've been stagnant for so long. And I'm grateful for people who keep bringing me back today, and also friends in the past who kind of won't let me sit in the stagnant, which is really amazing. And I feel really grateful.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow your lead, Jess. My present is the tree outside my window is changing color because it's getting cold up here. You can't see, but the entire floor is kind of covered in shit because my partner and I are COVID moving in together, and so managing the displacements of this and being both excited about that and a little bit terrified, and also like blah 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 in love, etc. So feeling super grateful for those and for that. Yeah, and then also like feeling again like holding who is here that's not here, like holding my family with me and not knowing when I'll see them. Holding I gotta change the word. because I don't want to hold it. I want to be with it and I want to let it go. Feeling the grief month, which I'm in. My partner who died in 2016, right before the election, they got out early. Their birthday is the 26th of September, and their death anniversary is October 26th. So it feels very much like I'm right in the middle of the epicenter of grief season, and that feels different, obviously, this year. And so, yeah, the present is heavy with a window, heavy with a window that I can open. Yeah. And extremely grateful to, like, because I think I was so nervous. My velvety nervousness was high before now, but somehow this little taking stock and then being able to just be with y'all has been really, yeah. I've held my heart more than one time in the last hour, and that feels really great to be thinking together with brilliant queers.
Thank you. And
Tommy, where you at?
Yeah. Where am I at?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm distended is the word I would use. I'm here and not here. I'm appreciative. I'm with gratitude to vibrate with you and to learn among the us of us, like figuring out who we are as a trio chatting, but more than that, with all the people we keep bringing with us. And this heaviness with the window that could be open. I work in a space where I can't open any windows, and that's the first century construction model. The air has to be recirculated in a certain kind of way. The windows will never be open where I'm standing to talk with you. So the heaviness, the window's there, but it can't be open. So I'm looking towards more of this. And it might be imaginary. I might imagine conversations with you, JP, and show up in your dreams, EN. I have a habit of using initials. I hope that doesn't offend you.
Right, I love it.
Okay, cool. And then, we will do this more. And I think that's the invitation of Lion's Jaw, is this kind of like, how do we keep assembling in unexpected ways? And I think for now, after this week, I'm going to need the experiment to be imaginary, because there's my imagining forward or imagining through time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to invite everyone on the call to unmute and express gratitude towards the panelists. We used that word before, but it's really towards the us of us and our assembly and our willingness to listen and learn and receive and share and imagine. We want to thank the Herc and, oh, I'm sorry, I lost the name just a second ago. It's with a T. Thank you. Yeah, Trisha, our ASL magicians and alchemists for helping to make the ideas keep being able to be shared out. Jared, did you want to come in?
Well, I'm so, I mean, it's so beautiful to hear so much shared experience and so much individual experience sort of fleshed out in such a beautiful way. It was just so nice to be able to sit back and be in the presence of that. So I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude and gratitude to MIT too, and again to the interpreters who just like amazing. Yeah, I mean, I don't have an official way of closing other than saying thank you and to invite people to tune in tomorrow. We have 2 more of these. Yeah, Thomas will be here again. So will Zavé, martohardjono, and Joseph Pierce. Yeah, I always desire like a way of continuing these conversations post, the way you would hang out in the hall and do this after something. But Yeah, that's really all from me, just extreme gratitude.
Eroca, Jess, thank you so much. Everybody, if you unmute and yell and scream, it's an amazing way to kind of bring it to its next place. So I recommend it.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, see
Thank
you
you so
again.
Thank
much.
you, Queen. Thank you, honey.
Thank you again.
Hey.
I said, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Hey,
Gracias, Hercules.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Ciao.